Welcome to the Gut 360 podcast. I'm your host, Ellie Breacher, a registered associate nutritionist on a mission to empower you to transform the health of your mind, body, and gut. This podcast is the place where we share nutrition tips, mindset tools, and actionable steps to help you thrive on your journey to a healthier gut and a happier you. If you're ready to get into the driver's seat of your own health and unlock your full potential, you're in the right place, and I am so glad you're here. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Gut 360 podcast. Today, we're talking about one of my favorite topics, something that actually transformed my life when I discovered its importance, and that is morning routines. I'll be sharing a selection of habits, rituals, and top tips that you can implement to set yourself up physically and mentally for a productive day ahead with a positive mindset, stable, balanced energy, and of course, a healthy, happy gut as well. If you're a loyal listener of the Gut 360 podcast, you'll know we always take a 360-degree approach to gut health because it's about so much more than just the food that we eat. Our lifestyle can have a real impact on our health, and the way we start our day is a really important part of our lifestyle. I truly believe that your morning routine can be a golden toolkit that allows you to nourish your mind, body, and gut once you understand how to use these tools. So whether you're an early bird or not, the rituals and routines that we're going to talk about today will really help you to optimize your morning regardless of what time you begin your day. We'll chat about everything from sunrise alarm clocks to my thoughts on caffeine, what's the best type of exercise, how to reset your circadian rhythm and what that even means, how to build a gut-friendly breakfast, and so much more in this episode. I don't know about you, but growing up, mornings were not very peaceful, to say the least, and I'm sure that's the same with most kids who are rushing out of the house to get to school on time. It was always a bit manic, but since I turned 18, my mornings have become a really peaceful time for me to fill up my own cup before the rest of the world wakes up. If you're rolling your eyes at me already and you're one of those people who sets their alarm with just enough time to brush your teeth, throw your clothes on and rush out the house, you need to listen to this. And once you start to implement some of these healthy habits, you'll see how it helps you thrive for the rest of the day. I'm a big believer that if you start your morning in a calm, positive, and intentional way, the rest of your day will follow suit and reflect this energy. But the same applies if you hit the snooze button multiple times, you roll out of bed with barely enough time to brush your teeth, and rush out the door. We've all had those mornings, and as you are probably already aware, this is going to put you in a state of high stress for the remainder of the day. I know this routine may seem a little overwhelming or out of reach the first time you listen to it, and I just want to highlight that everyone is different. So what works for you might not work for me, and that's okay. It's all about building these healthy habits, and the best way to do that is slow and steady. Pick one habit at a time. Do it every day for a couple of weeks before layering on a new habit. I see clients setting unrealistic expectations of themselves all the time in clinic, and that sets you up for failure. So just pick and choose what you like from this episode and try it one at a time. A good morning routine starts the night before, and if you're getting up early enough to make time for these healthy habits, that also means you need to go to bed earlier to account for that extra time. We're not talking about evening routines specifically in this episode, but let me tell you, winding down with an evening routine is just as important as a morning routine. And you need to make sure you're going to bed early enough for you to get enough sleep to wake up with plenty of time to do your morning routine before you need to be at work or out the door. Before we get into the 6-step morning routine for gut health and productivity, let's start by talking about how you wake up. Personally, I use a sunrise alarm clock, which I love. Mine is from Lumi. So instead of being jolted from your sleep by an alarm, this wakes you up gradually and more effectively with a gently brightening light that mimics a natural sunrise. And you can choose a sound as well if you like. I have mine set to tropical birds. So when I wake up, it sounds like I'm in the jungle in Costa Rica, and I wake up feeling calm and ready to jump out of bed. Just one more thing on the topic of how you wake up. Please don't snooze. We're not going to delve into this too much, but we all know it puts you in that mentality of procrastination for the rest of the day. It makes you think you can just put off the tasks that need to be done. Honestly, I remember listening to a podcast once by Mel Robbins, and she said that your morning routine is the first domino in your day. And your day is really just a series of decisions. So the first domino in that series of decisions determines how the other dominoes will fall across the day. And hitting the snooze button is exactly that. It's setting yourself up to procrastinate and to put things off. Now let's get into my morning routine. The very first step to creating the ultimate morning routine is this. When I was a kid, my dad was trying to teach my siblings and I to make our beds. And he showed us a speech on YouTube, which was given by a US Navy SEAL called William McRaven. And in the speech, he shared some inspiring life lessons from basic SEAL training. You might be wondering why I'm sharing this on the podcast, and I promise it ties in nicely. One of the things in the speech that he said was, if you want to change the world, start by making your bed. Now, this might seem like an insignificant act, but its effects ripple throughout the day. He goes on to explain the wisdom behind the simple task of making your bed, and I think the same can be applied to your entire morning routine. He says it feels good to accomplish something and lays the foundation for your next task and another and another. And it also is a reminder that the little things in life matter, which is a lesson and a mindset shift that you'll carry throughout the rest of your day. So that one is more of a productivity one than gut health specifically, but I think it's so important. Once you've made your bed, you brush your teeth, and then we move on to step 2, which is hydration. After being asleep for ideally at least 8 hours, our bodies are dehydrated by the time we wake up. And you can just start with a glass of water or pop the kettle on, make a nice herbal tea. I like adding a few fresh mint leaves or some freshly grated ginger to a mug of warm water. Staying hydrated is important for gut motility, in other words, keeping your digestion moving. Now, let's talk about caffeine for a sec. Everyone is different when it comes to how caffeine affects them, and we all metabolize caffeine at different rates. But I don't personally drink any caffeine on an empty stomach ever, because caffeine can irritate the gut. It really affects my gut, and I know that I'm not alone on that. And it also makes me feel a bit jittery, so if I do decide to drink caffeine, it's always after a meal. If you're a coffee person, that's absolutely fine, but at least make sure you're fully hydrated first. Personally, I prefer matcha to coffee. I love the ritual of making a matcha latte. I love the taste, and it offers so many health benefits, which we'll talk about later on in this episode. The next part of that 360-degree approach we talked about is daily movement. And that is step 3 in our 6-step morning routine for gut health and productivity. I've intentionally chosen the word movement over exercise here because it really doesn't need to be an intense gym session. I get asked all the time, what's the best kind of exercise? And honestly, the main thing is just that you pick something you enjoy so that you can stick to it and it's sustainable and realistic. We know that exercise alters your gut microbes and helps to improve diversity in the gut microbiome, which is a sign of a healthy gut. For me, every morning I do at least 10 minutes of dynamic stretching and a few yoga poses that help to wake up my body and get the blood flowing. Even on the busiest days, and actually especially on the busiest days, those 10 minutes of yoga or stretching are an absolute non-negotiable. It's so deeply ingrained in my routine now that I do it on autopilot. As soon as I've brushed my teeth, poured my herbal tea, I find myself on my yoga mat, and some days when I have a bit more time, I end up stretching for up to half an hour, perhaps following a yoga video on YouTube. Some of my favorite YouTubers for yoga at the moment are Yoga with Cassandra with a K and Annie Clark. I went on her yoga retreat a few years ago, and she has a really nice calming energy. Other days, if I need to go into central London for work, I'll book myself into a bar class or Reformer Pilates at a studio. I love Cycle, but there are so many great ones in London these days. I love the boost of endorphins that these classes leave me with. But also, workouts don't have to leave you dripping in sweat and panting for breath to be effective. You can reap the physical and mental health benefits from a short yoga session in the comfort of your own home. Even just a few minutes is so much better than no movement at all. Once you finish your 10 minutes or so of stretching, that brings us on to step 4, where you're going to stay seated on your yoga mat for another 5 to 10 minutes of meditation. Okay, before you jump to conclusions about meditation being too spiritual for you, just hear me out. I'll be honest, I used to think the same. And then when I did eventually accept that so many of the most successful people in the world meditate, I was still so adamant that I was too busy and I didn't have time. But the truth is, I did have time. I was just prioritizing everything else above meditation because I didn't appreciate quite how life-changing it could be. And really, the busier your life is, the more you actually need to meditate. There's a Buddhist saying that goes, you should sit in meditation for 20 minutes every day unless you're too busy, then you should sit for an hour. I'm not saying you have to meditate for an hour, but you get the point. It took me quite a while to get this habit locked into my routine, but I started with just 60 seconds a day and built it up over time. And now I can't imagine my mornings without this peaceful moment to quieten my mind. Studies have shown that daily meditation can help to reduce stress, manage anxiety, develop your concentration, improve sleep patterns, and even benefit your gut health. And what I mean by that is we know that the gut and brain are so closely connected through the gut-brain axis, which I've talked about on here before. So reducing our stress can genuinely improve our gut health. I know I mentioned this in last week's episode, how to improve your gut health and banish brain fog. So if you haven't listened to that one, then definitely go back and download it. But essentially, meditation actually activates the rest and digest response, which is the opposite of our body being in fight or flight mode. So by reducing our stress levels with meditation and a nice calm morning routine, we're supporting our gut health. If you don't know where to begin, there are so many affordable apps that make meditation super easy and accessible. The really popular ones are Calm and Headspace. Jay Shetty actually has his own meditation series on the Calm app, which is brilliant. Another app that I like is called Just Breathe. And then there's the Mindflow Breathwork app, which is by someone called Sophie Bell, who I absolutely love. I recently purchased an annual subscription to her app. And there's a really great variety of meditations and breathwork exercises on there. When you finish meditating, it's time to move on to step 5, which actually combines two very important things. And these are natural daylight and getting your steps in. Something I talk about all the time over on Instagram is that exposure to direct sunlight first thing in the morning helps to regulate our circadian rhythm. That just means our natural body clock. Beyond the scientific health benefits, we all know fresh air makes us feel great. And if you're fortunate enough to live close to a green space, then definitely try to get out in nature. But even if you're just walking around the roads near where you live, this is still great. I typically go for a 20-minute walk first thing, which makes me feel so good before spending most of the day seated behind my laptop. And you might find you enjoy listening to a motivational podcast, an audiobook, or just some upbeat music while you walk. Just a quick side note here before we move on to the final step. As well as ensuring your eyes see natural daylight, it's also important to try to limit the artificial blue light exposure, which is emitted by technology screens, including, of course, our phones, when we wake up and also before bedtime. I make a real effort to stay off my phone, at least for the first 30 minutes after waking up, sometimes longer if I can. And since I started doing this, I promise you it has made the biggest difference to how I feel for the rest of the day. Not only because of the blue light it emits, but also being bombarded with messages, scrolling through Instagram stories where everyone's lives look way more glamorous than they actually are, can make you feel kind of bad about yourself. And if you don't believe me, then try this for literally 3 days and see how much better you feel. The 6th and final step of our morning routine for gut health and productivity is my favorite step of them all. It's my favorite meal of the day. It's time for breakfast, and I'm actually planning to do an entire podcast episode all about how to build a balanced, gut-friendly breakfast. But some quick tips that I can share with you today are just make sure you've got a good source of protein, healthy fats, and fiber at breakfast time and actually every meal. This is going to help keep your energy levels high, your blood sugar stable until lunchtime, and avoid that mid-morning crash. So some of my favorite ways to include these 3 components at breakfast time. For protein, think about things like eggs, nuts, seeds, tofu, chickpeas, beans, smoked salmon, high quality protein powder. For your healthy fats, go for avocado, nuts, nut butters like peanut butter, almond butter, any seeds, olive oil. And then fiber, your main sources are going to be fruits and vegetables, walnuts, almonds, chia seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, and oats as well. In another episode, I will give you a lot more specific meal ideas and recipe ideas, but I truly believe that good gut health starts with breakfast. So I've published a free ebook sharing a week of gut healthy breakfasts to inspire you to nourish your gut for the next 7 days and beyond. So if you are looking for some healthy breakfast ideas, you might want to take a look at this free download on my website. It's called A Week of Gut Healthy Breakfasts. It's got loads of delicious, nutritious breakfast ideas to support your gut health, from shakshuka and homemade hummus to overnight oats and smoothies. I'll make sure I leave a link for that in the show notes below this episode so you can go straight there, and you'll also be able to see all my other free downloads like how to transform your gut in 5 simple steps and my go-to healthy shopping list that I share with my clients. After breakfast, I take my vitamin D supplement, which helps to support the immune system, bone health, and gut health. Hopefully you guys are all aware that everyone in the UK is advised to take vitamin D as a supplement in the winter months, so between October and March. That's because we don't get enough sunlight to meet our needs here in the UK and in many other countries around the world that aren't sunny all year round. Then after I've eaten, I'll go and make my matcha latte most days, and I just love the process of taking a few minutes to make a delicious mug of matcha. It almost feels like an act of self-care for me. If you're not sure what matcha is, it's a powder made from finely ground green tea leaves. It's packed with antioxidants and polyphenols, which help to feed the beneficial gut bacteria. And in terms of caffeine, matcha contains some caffeine, but less than coffee. But this caffeine is released at a much slower rate than in coffee, thanks to an amino acid called L-theanine. And L-theanine creates a calm and gentle buzz with a sustained release of energy, rather than that coffee spike and crash that you might get. You might have tried matcha once and not loved it, but quality is everything. I feel like matcha is on the menu everywhere these days, but so many cafes, especially the high street chains, use really poor quality matcha that doesn't taste great, and unfortunately this can easily put people off. In my opinion, the best way to enjoy matcha is making it yourself at home, using a high-quality matcha powder from a trusted brand. My favorite matcha brand is always Perfect Head. It's organic, ceremonial grade. It tastes the best. So if you haven't tried it, then definitely order some. You can use the discount code LE10 for 10% off, and I'll leave the link in the show notes below this episode to their website. In terms of how I make my matcha latte, I actually have an Instagram story highlight saved on my profile showing you the exact process that I do. So head over to my Instagram to see that. My handle is at Ellie Breacher Nutrition, and I'll link my social media in the show notes as well. I actually created this Instagram hashtag Morning Matcha Moments, and I feel like it's gone semi-viral, but I'm pretty sure that I started it years ago. So if you try matcha after listening to this, then I would love for you to tag me in your hashtag Morning Matcha Moments, and I'll repost you. Once my matcha is ready, I sit down at my desk to go through my to-do list, which I always write at the end of the previous workday, top tip. And then I'm ready to get straight into work with a clear head and a productive mindset. And that brings us to the end of my 6-step morning routine. So let's do a quick recap. Step number 1 was making your bed. Step 2 was hydration. Step 3 was morning movement. Step 4, meditation or breath work. Step 5, a morning walk to reset your circadian rhythm. And step 6, a gut-friendly breakfast followed by vitamin D in the winter and a matcha latte. Before I bring this podcast to a close, I just want to reiterate that these habits are a combination of the things that make me feel my best. And like I said in the intro, everyone is so different. So feel free to pick and choose. You can find what resonates most with you and leaves you feeling energetic and excited to tackle the day ahead. Even if you've never considered yourself to be a morning person, if you actually try some of these every day, I guarantee you will soon see mornings in a new light, and you'll quickly realize that your morning routine is the structure and the foundation of your day. I hope you guys loved listening to this episode as much as I love talking about morning routines. Who knew they could get so exciting? If you did take away any value or new tips and tricks that you want to try out, I would love if you could rate and leave a review wherever you're listening to this. It really does help my podcast to reach a wider audience so we can empower more people to take back control of their gut health. I would also love to know what you'd add to this morning routine. Have I left anything off? Let me know if I have. And if you start trying any of these healthy habits, please tag me in a story on Instagram. I'd love to see. My handle's at Ellie Breacher Nutrition and my DMs are always open. Drop me a message. Tell me what you thought of today's episode. And I hope you have the best week ahead. I'll be back with another episode next Monday. So make sure you hit the follow button so you don't miss it. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Gut 360 podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast or learned something new, it would mean the world to me if you could leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. And make sure you hit follow for weekly episodes every Monday morning. Do share this podcast with anyone who you think it may benefit. And for your chance to win a free online nutrition consultation with me, just take a screenshot of this episode and share it on your Instagram stories, tagging at Ellie Breacher Nutrition so I can repost you. See you back here next Monday.